So next on our task list is to create our user controller. So let's head back to VS Code. And inside the controllers folder in our API, I'm just going to create a new C# class. And this one I'm going to call user controller. And we'll derive from our new base controller. And this means we only need to write our method root attributes. And this is going to be an HTTP post. And we'll add an additional root parameter here called login. And what we'll do is we'll create our method and we'll make this a public async task of action results. And we'll pass in the app user, which is what we're going to be returning from this particular method. And then we'll use the login. And let's bring in everything we need here. System threading tasks. And we'll also need ASP.NET Core MVC, and we'll also need our domain as well. And inside the parameters for our login, this is going to be using our login.query, and we'll also need to bring in application user here as well. And we'll say login.query, and we'll just say query. And this is going to contain our username and password, or our email address and password that we're sending up in the body of the request to our login method. And what we're going to do is return await mediator.send, and we'll pass in the query. So with this in place, we should be able to test that we can now log in a user and get our user object back from this particular request. So let's head back to Postman and let's take a look at the different requests that I've already pre-built for you so that we can make our testing a little bit easier in this case. And what we're doing here is we're sending a post request to API user and login. And don't forget our URL is for localhost 5000. Now in the body of this request is just the email and password for bob@test.com along with the password we created earlier. So if you did decide to create users with different names and different passwords, then please make sure you update this. And if we click send, we interestingly get a 404 not found. Now why is this? Now we're specifying the API user login, which should be correct. If I take a look at my user controller, it's coming from our base controller, which has the API followed by the controller name, and we're using that in our user controller. So this will be API/user, and then we've got the login as our root. And since I have no reasonable explanation as to why this is not working, I'm just going to restart my server as the first response to this, just to make sure it genuinely persists if I restart the server. And if I click send, and this time I get a 200 OK. Interesting why that didn't work the first time, but it's working now after a restart. And what we can see here is we get all of our properties for our user back from our API, including our display name, the ID, the username, worryingly the password hash as well, and basically too much information to send back when we log in a user. And obviously this isn't what we want to do going forward. So now we know that we can log in a user, that's good, but let's take a look at what happens when we don't meet our validation rules. And this next request is to test our login of a user with a validation error. And if I take a look at the body of what we're sending up, then we're just sending up an empty password here. So this should hit our validation rules and not hit our handler logic, and we should be exiting out of that method before we even get to see if we've got the user in a database. So if I click send, then we get the 400 bad request and the error object with the password must not be empty. So that's fine. Let's check the login user with a bad password, and if we take a look at the body of this request, then the email address is correct at bob@test.com and the password is just bad password. And if we click send, Then we get the 401 unauthorized. That's also good. And if we attempt to log in a user with a bad email address, and this particular email is fake@test.com, then what we should also get is a 401 unauthorized, and we do. But what we don't want to do is send back all of this information when we log in a user. So let's take a look at creating a new user object that we can send back in place of this, and we'll take a look at that next.